Hey guys, finding the perfect gift for the food lover in your life is easy, thanks to Goldbelly. Goldbelly ships America's most iconic foods, straight from world-famous restaurants right to your door. So if you want to treat someone to Joe's Stone Crab from Miami, Franklin Barbecue from Texas, or desserts from famous foodies like Ina Garten or Martha Stewart, Goldbelly has you covered. Just go to goldbelly.com and for a limited time, get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT. That's promo code GIFT.
I've got to tell you about this game-changing product. It's called Z-Biotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic Drink, and it's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic invented by PhD scientists. When you drink, a toxic byproduct builds up in your gut. That's to blame for rough mornings. Z-Biotics is designed to break this byproduct down. Just make it your first drink of the night. Head to zbiotics.com/wild and use code WILD to get 15% off and 100% money back guarantee. That's zbiotics.com/wild.
Welcome to Complete BS, the official podcast of couch coaches everywhere. Not just football. It's every sport that ruins your parlay, wrecks your fantasy week, and still brings you back for more. Buzzer beaters, blown leads, and brackets and flames. Yeah, we're all over it. Unfiltered takes, armchair analysis, and enough bold opinions to fill a playbook. Hosted by Brien Schmauch, sports junkie, the Saban of stats and your official voice of, I could coach better than that. Let's go.
Couch Coach Nation, it's now October, and it's hard to believe that we are now in week 6 of the season. This week's slate of games isn't as grand as it was last week, but there are 8 top 25 teams on buys. We've got 2 ranked versus ranked matchups, so when we have weekends like this, there's one thing that always seems to happen with college football, and that's chaos and upsets. There's not a whole lot to be excited about with Friday night's matchups, so I'm going to skip the talk of Friday night games, and we're going to hop on the coaching carousel for a minute. Last week, we didn't mention Oklahoma State firing Mike Gundy, and I've seen on social media a lot of Cowboy fans wanting Zach Robinson, their former quarterback and current Atlanta Falcons offensive coordinator. With the NFL season, though, going into the first week of January, that's also in transfer portal time, and you're behind the 8 ball if you're waiting on Zach Robinson. You hire him, but he still hasn't put a staff together, and you're trying to get portal recruits in, recruit your own team, evaluate things. It's really tough to do unless he's just going to abandon the Falcons before the season's over, and maybe they're okay with that. I don't know, but I think the right route to go would be Colin Klein, the Texas A&M offensive coordinator and former Kansas State quarterback. I think it's a better fit there. He knows that region in the heartland for recruiting high school ties. He's got relationships down in Texas, and if you're Oklahoma State, you need to recruit the state of Texas really well, but he understands Big 12 football. With Arkansas, I wonder if they're even going to have a search, or are they just going to give it full time to Bobby Petrino? Personally, I think that would be a horrible idea. We know what Petrino's character is, and that's not good. Rhett Lashley's an obvious choice. He was a star high school quarterback in Arkansas. He played at Arkansas and started his coaching career there as a grad assistant. I would make the call if I were Hunter Yurchek and make him tell me no, but that's not the only call I would make. There is another coach out there who you interviewed twice before you hired Sam Pittman, who may have reached the ceiling of where they're at and might be ready for something different, who has shown the ability to pull some big-time high school recruits and some transfers out of the portal. He's also got really close ties to one of your more famous alumni in Jerry Jones. That's right. I'm suggesting with SEC money and a Southern footprint, Deion Sanders could make some noise at Arkansas if they wanted to go that route. AV, you got any thoughts on Oklahoma State or Arkansas?
I don't know that the Atlanta Falcons offensive coordinator excites me, but I'm not an Oklahoma State fan or alum, so I don't have the ties there. I feel like they could possibly do better than him. Deion is an interesting name in Arkansas. Like, you know, he's a little bit too much prime for Arkansas, but he fit well in Mississippi when he was there at the lower level. If they give the job to Bobby Petrino, everybody should be fired. It wouldn't excite me at all. I think that would be terrible. I don't think that'll happen, though, but the fact that he's even around and being named is surprising. So I love the coaching carousel. It'll be interesting to see what these guys do. There'll be plenty more, though. If you have an open job now, you want to get the jump on the other open jobs coming up. So it'll be interesting to see if they let this play out throughout the season because they're waiting on a coach that has a job or something, and then all of a sudden that coach has multiple offers. That's always fun to watch. And I will say this, that I feel like Virginia Tech got better since they fired their coach. They won last week, right? right? It doesn't always mean like your season's tanked. Like sometimes they can rally around a new voice and you can win a couple of games down the stretch.
Yeah, I think Virginia Tech's got a real good chance to win this week. Again,
Yep.
UCLA on the other side, their season's done.
Yeah, probably so.
Let's start off with Texas at Florida. This game's in the Swamp. Texas is 3-1, but only beaten really bad teams. Florida's 1-3 and only beat one team. Neither team has a win over a Power 4 team. Florida's defense has kept them in games, and they've had a chance in the second half of all their losses. If the offense can show any signs of life, they can turn things around. I fully expect the home crowd to have a big say in this game. They're going to rattle Arch. They're going to be loud. It's going to be electric. Very similar kind of atmosphere to what Texas had to play in the Horseshoe up at Ohio State. Preseason, we thought this was going to be a showdown of Heisman caliber quarterbacks, and both have been pretty pedestrian so far. This is Texas's first road trip since they went up to Ohio State and looked really bad in the process. The Florida defense is every bit as good as Ohio State's, and the atmosphere, like I said, it's going to be crazy in the Swamp. Has Arch Manning grown any in the 3 home pushover wins that they've had? AV, what am I missing here?
I think he's gotten incrementally better through those 3 games. He looked really bad against Ohio State. Now, some of that is first game on the road, best defense he'll face all year, but then he didn't look very good the second game either. But I feel like he's gotten a little more comfortable each game. Now, Florida will be the toughest defense since Ohio State, but they're banged up. Their morale has to be down. I don't know that I agree with you about the home crowd being, like, I think they will if Florida shows up and performs, but if they get down early, the home crowd might start booing the coach. It could be like an opposite effect. So they're both coming off a bye week. I feel like the bye week will help Texas more because they're more stable. They can just focus on improving. I feel like Billy Napier is just trying to hold the program together. Florida has the talent to stick around at home against these guys. Although I will say their offense didn't look good against Miami or LSU, and I feel like Texas's defense is going to be tougher than both of theirs. I don't know what to make of DJ Lagway. They keep saying the offense is close to popping, and I kind of see that because against like LSU, he had good numbers minus the 5 interceptions. He threw for almost 300 yards. Against USF, even though they're not a great team, between the 20s, they just ran up and down the field, and then they bogged down in the red zone and kicked field goals. So it's possible. I don't see it happening against this Texas defense. Florida's DL is still banged up. I got Texas winning, going away 30-13.
I couldn't disagree with you more. I see Texas kind of looking past Florida because of their record and knowing that Texas has the Red River rivalry against Oklahoma next week. For Florida, I'll keep beating the same drum. That offensive line has got to decide that they want to impose their will on a defense and get that running game going. Jaden Baugh is far too talented for him not to get 20 to 25 carries. I think the home crowd is going to be what the Swamp is. I see this being a really low-scoring defensive game where both offenses struggle. I don't think Arch is as good as everyone built him up to be. He's back on the road again. This is all about defense. And when you get into the fourth quarter and that crowd's going nuts, I've got the Gators in an upset, 13-10. Looking at Vanderbilt at Alabama, 40-35. That was the score last year when Vanderbilt shocked us all and beat then number 1 Alabama. This is a matchup of 2 quarterbacks that are playing at a really high level right now. Vanderbilt's averaging 49 points a game through 5 games, good for 4th in the country. They're also ranked 4th nationally in third down conversions at almost 61%. Alabama's third down defense is ranked 99th. Vandy's got the ability to keep drives going, and that could play a big role in this game. How do you like it, AV?
I think this is like one of the more intriguing matchups of the weekend. I'm really looking forward to watching this. I think if you put Vanderbilt's resume on Tennessee, like this game would be the game of the century. Alabama's giving away like 11.5 points, and I don't understand that. I'm staying away from it, but Vandy's beat Virginia Tech. They didn't just beat them. They put 44 on them. They beat South Carolina 31-7. They beat Utah State 55-35. They put up points, and the problem they pose for Alabama is their offense is a lot like Florida State's. They got a running quarterback who can throw just well enough. They'll mix in some trick plays and some misdirection. Alabama doesn't handle the run. Georgia ran for 200 plus on them last week, but Alabama won. So I don't like the matchup for Bama, but that Alabama, Ty Simpson, I think, is one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the country, and he ain't number 5. And so they have some momentum now after beating Georgia. They have a renewed sense of urgency and life injected into that program. So I think Alabama comes away with a win, but I just think that Vanderbilt can keep surprising people, and people will just keep being surprised for some reason. It wouldn't shock me at all if they won this game.
This is one of the games that I think has been the toughest for me to pick this entire season.
For sure.
Everything that I look at makes me want to go to Vanderbilt and pick them. Vandy knows they can beat Bama. They did it last year, and that's often a mental block that a lot of teams have. Vanderbilt doesn't have that. But then you've got Alabama wanting payback for that embarrassment last year that kind of put them on a little bit of a downward spiral towards the end of the year. I keep going back and forth on it. At the end of the day, it's in Tuscaloosa. I expect a lot of offense in this game, and I'm going to say Alabama gets the revenge, 41-34. But like you, I think the line is too high. I wouldn't touch it. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if Vanderbilt wins straight up.
Yeah, same.
Miami and Florida State, I'll give my thoughts on this game and prediction a little bit later with Corey Simon. What do you got, AV?
This is also kind of one of those matchup things where I think Florida State's obvious strength is their offense. I think Miami's better unit is their defense. So it's good on good there. And then it's the Miami offense and FSU defense. So, it's a tough one. FSU's at home. I think Miami comes in a little more confident. They haven't lost a game. They've kind of run over everybody they played. But FSU, I think, will put up points on them, which will surprise them. They haven't really given up a lot of points this year. It's a contrast of styles. Look at Miami as big, powerful, fast on defense. FSU is running the ball, and running the ball right into that sounds bad, but they tend to find ways to create room. I'll go coin flip, and when it's a coin flip, I typically go home team. So I'm going to go FSU 27-24.
Yeah, I definitely think that this is a game that the over could be in play. I like that play a lot more than the under. I think there will be both teams are going to definitely be in the 20s, if not the 30s.
Interesting.
Now it's time to open another chapter from AV's book club. What do you got in the book club?
I got some stone cold locks this week, B. You're not going to like the first one. I'm taking Texas -6.5. I know you have your concerns about Arch Manning, but have you seen the other quarterback play lately? It ain't good, brother. And there's rumors that he's walking around in a boot. The offense is taking him out to dinner as a pep rally for him. It is flabbergasting the turn DJ Lagway has taken. Now, could that all change after a bye week? I guess. But I like Texas's defense too much to assume he will have his breakout week against them. So I'm taking Texas -6.5. I'm taking Troy -2.5 versus South Alabama. South Alabama's got a weak run defense. Troy runs the ball well. Troy's beat them 6 out of 7. It's at home. It's a small spread. I'm laying the points. And then I've got Clemson -13.5. This is just as much a fade of North Carolina as anything. I think North Carolina is a dysfunctional mess. I think Clemson, there's no way Dabo's going to let them lose this game. Dabo might not come back to Clemson, South Carolina if they lose this game. So I'm laying the points with Clemson 13.5. I think that's easy money. I don't know that North Carolina scores, to be honest. So you got Texas, Clemson, Troy, all laying points. Lock and load.
My bonus pick for the week, Mississippi State getting 14.5 at Texas A&M. Texas A&M is one of the more penalty-prone teams in the country. They're last in the SEC. Last week they had 13 penalties. You just stall drives with those penalties over and over. Foolish mistakes. A&M's got a strong defense, and the offense has shown flashes. I expect Texas A&M to win, but Mississippi State last week pushed a really good Tennessee team to overtime. I think they can keep it to 14 or less points. Not calling for the win, just the cover. Mississippi State getting 14.5. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back with Florida State All-American Corey Simon. Welcome back, Couch Coach Nation. I'm excited to have Florida State legend, All-American, and 6th overall pick in the 2000 NFL Draft, Corey Simon, join us on Complete BS. Coming out of Pompano Beach, he was selected the Miami Herald's Defensive Player of the Year and USA Today All-USA team. At Florida State, he was a 4-year standout for Bobby Bowden's Seminoles. His senior year, he was one of the team captains of FSU's wire-to-wire, undefeated national championship team in 1999. He was a consensus All-American and finalist for the Lombardi and Outland trophies. He terrorized opponents' backfields, racking up 21 tackles for loss and 9 sacks. In 2000, the Philadelphia Eagles made him the 6th overall pick. He made an immediate impact with 9.5 sacks as a rookie and was named to the Pro Football Writers All-Rookie team. He was a 2003 Pro Bowl selection. He had 32 sacks in his 5 years in Philadelphia. His career was cut short due to injuries, but was a member of the Super Bowl champion Colts in 2006. After a successful pro football career, Corey created Corey's Kids, a nonprofit providing mentorship to kids within the foster system. He also coached youth football and served as the CEO of Volunteer Florida before hearing the call to serve in a different capacity and running for the Florida Senate, where he's been elected twice and represents 13 counties. Corey, it's great to have you on with us.
Thanks for having me, Brian. Good to be here.
So one of the first questions I always ask everyone, because I'm always fascinated by the process, is your recruiting process coming out of South Florida. What was that like for you, and where were you considering besides Florida State?
Well, I have to kind of dive in the memory banks a little bit. It's been a long, long time since I went through recruiting. Things have changed a lot since the early 90s. I wish we had some of that NIL space that we have now, but I really enjoyed the recruiting process. Coming out of Pompano Beach, I had the chance to play with a lot of great players, a lot of guys that went on to play Division I football, but really it was a blessing to have the folks, the likes of Lou Holtz and Bobby Bowden and even Steve Spurrier sitting in my living room and talking with my mother and I and really evaluating what would be the best place for me. And it really came down to, it wasn't a 4-year decision, it was a 40-year decision. It's much like the conversations that I have with young players today. You know, once your time is done, where would you want to make home? And I will tell you, I didn't see Tallahassee as that place initially. It was a little slower for me growing up in Broward County. But once I got here on campus, I just really fell in love with the city, fell in love with the campus. Coach Bowden was an absolute gem. He is a closer when it comes to sitting down with parents. And he was walking out of the door as Terry Bowden was walking in the door. He and Jimbo Fisher was the person that recruited me when he was at Auburn. And I remember the conversation, Coach Bowden was, basically telling Terry, listen, I'm going to tell your mama because you're not supposed to be down here. And it was just a really lighthearted, seeing how everything came full circle, my time getting a chance to spend a little bit of time with Jimbo and over the years really getting to know him. But having the three of them sitting down in my living room was pretty special. I told Jimbo when I was trying to get Jimbo to come here to take the job to be our offensive coordinator, Jimbo said, Corey, well, you didn't come to Auburn. I said, well, the problem is I took the visit to Auburn. And there was just not much in Auburn. And you look across from the dorms and you see cow pastures, just wasn't something that was appealing to a young kid from Broward County. But I really did enjoy the process and getting a chance to meet some legendary coaches in the game.
Well, Bobby Bowden, obviously a legend that you got to play for. What was it like playing for him once you got here, and what have you learned from him?
Oh, my gosh. Well, playing for him, you don't realize the icon, at least I didn't realize the icon that Coach Bowden was until I left, until I got in an NFL locker room. And guys would ask all the time is, man, Corey, what was it like playing for Coach Bowden? And these were guys that were, in high regard, top draft picks, getting an opportunity to play at the top of their game. And they were just enamored with who Coach Bowden was. To me, he was the father figure that a lot of us didn't have. Talking with several players, he was the first male to ever put their arms around you and told you that he loved you. It wasn't the football knowledge. It was because Coach Bowden did an amazing job of really coaching his coaches and allowing his coaches to be kind of front and center with the players. But Coach Bowden did the coaching behind the scenes. Occasionally he would kind of chime in and make corrections, but Coach Bowden believed in coaching his coaches and allowing his coaches to go out there and put the game plan in and do those things. And so my time with Coach Bowden was sitting in his office talking about all of the things that had nothing to do with football. It was about his faith, it was about his family, and it was about football. But football was last on that list, and it was a distant third. It was never about football with him and how he handled us as young men, really trying to steer us in the right direction. He had a passion for community. And those things are the things that rubbed off on me. I have been blessed beyond measure, but the fact that we get a chance to go out and serve our fellow man, treat people the way you want to be treated, All of those things are tenets that Coach Bowden lived by.
And taking it a step further, you mentioned coaching his coaches. You had one, probably, in my opinion, the best defensive coordinator ever in college football in Mickey Andrews, and then your defensive tackles coach, Odell Haggins. You had a trio there of the best that ever did it.
Listen, and then when you talk about Chuck Amato, who had me earlier on, I tell people all the time, I kind of broke Odell in. Odell was kind of working with the tight ends when I first got to FSU, and Chuck Amato was the defensive line coach. And then my last 2 years, Odell took over as the D-line coach, the interior defensive line coach. And so all of the hubris that you see on the sidelines from Odell now 30 years down the road are all things that we got a chance, myself and my old roommate and dear friend Jerry Johnson, we kind of broke him in and gave him a welcome to college football and dealing with knuckleheads like us. You know, he and Mickey and Chuck just demanded attention to detail. They demanded focus. They demanded that you went out there and you played hard. They didn't care what the media said about you. They didn't care where you were ranked in terms of how good everybody else thought you were. They demanded that you be better. And that's the thing about us, and what made us such a really good team for so long is they never let the outside noise impact what was going on inside that locker room. It was always about going out there and giving your absolute best. And if you weren't, the next guy was going to step up and take your job. And that's the way we saw it here. Everybody that played at FSU in the 90s and early 2000s were all Americans. We had several guys that were defensive players of the year in their communities that they came from. So you were nothing special from a football standpoint. You were going to come here and you had to compete. And that's what they demanded of you every single day you stepped foot on that football field. And of course, every offseason when you stepped foot in that mat room where the test was administered and whether you passed or failed, it was everything on this team.
With that 99 team, what was the conversation leading up amongst the players? Did you guys know you were going to have a really special year?
Well, you know, the expectation for us was go 1-0 every week. There was never this grand plan. Of course, we all wanted to win a national championship. Coming out of the 98 Fiesta Bowl, there was this sour taste, and everybody knew on that team, listen, we lost an opportunity when Winky went down, and Marcus Allison did an amazing job of stepping in there, but those are some big shoes to fill. But when Peter Warrick decided he was going to come back, and I decided that I was going to come back and be a part of this team, we wanted to make sure that we were the team that had their picture on Coach Bowden's desk, that one frame for an undefeated team to go on and win a national championship.
Not to be a proponent of Nole-on-Nole crime, but if the 1999 FSU team lined up against the 2013 FSU team, who's going to win?
So I got two answers to that one. The competitor in me would say that we would run the table on them, but the analyst in me says that would have been a very tough game. That 2013 team was pretty darn special. We had some very talented players. I think what they were able to put into the NFL on both sides of the ball was pretty darn special. And so that would have been a tough one. You know, maybe we'd have fought them to a tie. How about that?
Okay. Was there a bigger rival for you being from South Florida? Was it Miami or was it UF? And what were those Miami games like that you played in?
Oh, man, listen, I never lost to Miami, and none of the games outside of our senior year were relatively close. I mean, Miami was going through a down patch, but man, it felt good going back home in the summers and getting a chance to brag. My barber back down in Pompano was a huge Miami fan, and so to sit in his chair and get a haircut and with a big smile on my face, knowing that his beloved Canes took it on the chin, you know, was pretty special. But I think the University of Miami lost a lot when they closed down the Orange Bowl. Going into that place was always daunting. I mean, you're driving right through Overtown. You know, they would rock your bus. I think now where they play their games now, it's very corporate. It used to be intimidating walking into the OB. But those are some heated rivalries. I will tell you, I had a special hate, and I still do, for the University of Florida. Miami, it was a respect thing. I respected Miami. I hated Florida. And it still to this day, it kind of sits with me.
So fast forward to April 2000. Walk us through draft night. Where were you? What was your reaction? What were you hearing leading up to that?
It was one of those things where my draft experience there weren't a lot of surprises. I took 2 visits during the process. I visited Baltimore and got a chance to talk with Brian Billick at the time, and Rex Ryan was the defensive line coach at the time. And Rex said, "Corey, I'll be standing on the table trying to get you." And I think they were drafting at 5. And then I had a meeting with Philadelphia. I traveled to Philadelphia, and I got a chance to sit down with Andy Reid. And when I had that meeting with Andy, Andy said, "Corey, I'm having a conversation with you that I'm not having with anybody else." And he says, "You're our guy. And if you're there at 6, are you okay being an Eagle?" And I told him absolutely. So I woke up on draft day and I was at home. I didn't go to New York for the draft. I really wanted to be around my family and friends. And so I woke up that morning of the draft and I saw across the bottom of ESPN that Sam Adams had been traded to the Baltimore Ravens. And so that automatically told me that I wasn't going to Baltimore. They had just picked up a big defensive tackle. And so at that point, I was pretty certain that I was going to Philadelphia at 6. And sure enough, I got the phone call just shortly after Baltimore pick. And Andy was like, "Hey, you ready to come to Philly?" And I said, "Listen, I'm waiting on you." So, we hopped on the plane shortly after that draft, and I was in the city of brotherly love just a couple hours later. And it was a whirlwind. I really, really appreciated Coach Reid. I've gotten a chance to play for some legends in the game, but I actually just got a chance to spend a little bit of time with him out in Kansas City a couple months ago. He's still a great friend, and I will forever be indebted and appreciative of all that Andy Reid instilled in me as a player and as a person.
On the field, going up against offensive linemen, who's the toughest offensive lineman you faced, whether it was in college or the NFL? And second part of that, who's the best trash talker you've been around?
Oh, man. I think the best offensive lineman that I played against in the NFL, that's a tough one, but I would have to say Will Shields. Will Shields was a beast when he was in Kansas City, and I only played against him once. And I had a really good game, but man, he was a technician. He understood angles. I learned a lot about myself playing against Will. I got a chance to play against some really good players over the years, but Will was right up there, and he's in the Hall of Fame now. So I did play against Steve Hutchinson, who played in Minnesota, another great player. Steve and I played against each other in high school. In high school, you kind of know those players that are kind of separated themselves from the pack, and Steve is one of those players. And so those 2 guys are really high up on my list. And in terms of trash talkers, I think Eric Williams was an offensive lineman for the Dallas Cowboys, Hall of Famer. He is probably the biggest trash talker. At that point in his career, he had become a little long in the tooth, but he was one of the dirtiest, funniest guys that I played against. I always enjoyed playing Dallas. We used to beat Dallas a lot back in the day, but he was fun to play against.
So after football, you got involved with youth. What made you want to get involved with youth coaching with your Corey's kids and giving back to the community?
That was always a part of who I was. The game of football gave me so much, and I really wanted to give that back to our kids. I ran Pop Warner for 13 years. I coached in it for a number of years. My son was really my first start at it. I didn't push football on him by any stretch of the imagination. When I first retired in 2008, we came back here to Tallahassee full time, and he loved the game. We put him in flag football, and he was out there trying to tackle kids. And so I said, "Hey, when he turned 6, I said, well, I might as well put you in pads to protect you and somebody else," which really got me tied to coaching. And they wouldn't let me just sit on the sidelines and be dad. And I was just fresh out of the game. And so I had some energy that, I wanted to go out there and coach and spend more time with him, which is one of the reasons why I retired when I did. It brings some stability. But I just enjoyed being around young people going out there and finding their way. At that age, kids don't even know if they like football. And so going out there, a good coach, will change their perception of what that game is and what it can mean for them and to them. And so I wanted to get a chance to coach, spend time with my son, but also teach them the life lessons that I learned at an early age. It teaches how to deal with success, how to deal with failure. It's one of those games that it'll reveal who you are at some juncture. And so that's why, I really got involved in just wanting to give back some of what it's been given to me. And just on the service part of it, that's how I grew up, from my high school coaches on through my time here at Florida State and into the NFL, giving back to community. That's been my lifeblood.
That leads me into my last question before we get to the game. How has football helped you in your professional life now as Senator Simon serving in the Florida Senate?
Listen, I tell people if the Senate chamber, if government in general operated like a locker room, I think we'd be in better shape. In a locker room, you get folks from all different facets and phases of life. You get your guys that are from rural communities, and you get your guys from inner cities. You get guys that grew up with a lot, and you play with guys that grew up with nothing. We have different opinions on just about everything, and you have a bunch of alpha males in this one location. So how do good teams become good teams? You end up coming together and understanding that winning at the end of the day is what matters. Whether you're winning a game or you're winning for your constituents in service or you're winning for your state, it's all relationship based. So I go into that Capitol every day and get a chance to go and fight for the people that I represent in my 13 counties and the people of this state. I've learned over the years how to disagree without being disagreeable. How you vote on a bill doesn't determine who you are as a person. Life is a lot more nuanced than that. And all of those things I learned through the game of football. And it's the emotional intelligence that it takes to move forward. And you're not who you are on your worst day, and you're not who you are on your best day. You're somewhere in the middle. And that's kind of how I do this job now. If you vote against a bill that I have up, it doesn't make you a bad person. It's just who I am and how I operate. And it's proven productive for the folks that I serve. I represent a district that's largely rural outside of Leon County. It's a very rural district, and we have real concerns and real issues. I serve resource-starved communities, and it entails me having to see through some of the stuff that grabs headlines and really get to the heart of what will help my community.
Let's go ahead and dive into Saturday night, Doak Campbell, Miami at Florida State. And these are two teams that don't really like each other that much, but there is that mutual respect, as you talked about earlier. Miami enters the game undefeated and ranked number 3 in the country. Florida State comes in at 3-1 off a road loss last week where they couldn't tackle anybody. This is Miami's first road game of the season. The Miami defensive line, I think, could actually be the difference in the game. If they can slow down the Seminoles run and make Castellanos have to win with the pass, that could make it a long night for Florida State. The Miami defensive line, they've got some length, and we saw last Friday Castellanos, his height be a little bit of an issue with some of his passing lanes and balls getting tipped. So I think that's going to be something to watch within this game. If Tommy can roll out and they can move the pocket and get away from that traditional pocket, he's really good on the run. He's very mobile. He's good throwing on the run. So getting him outside of that pocket and having him throw on the run, if it's not there, he can take off and run. I think that's going to help him and take away some of that defensive line advantage that Miami might have. When you look at this game, how do you see it shaping up?
I think you make some very good points. Miami's defensive line is good, but Florida State's offensive line is really good. And they've done a really good job of protecting Tommy and giving him some time in the pocket. And there's something, it's very difficult. Miami hasn't seen this year of really playing against a mobile quarterback with the number of weapons that we have on offense. And so them being able to pin their ears back and just get after the quarterback will be it'll be difficult because you have a quarterback that can get out of there and make that a very long day for defensive linemen, especially if Florida State can stay ahead of the chains, right? You don't want to end up in a 3rd and 7+ setup every time you're out there. And so we've got to go out there. Our offensive line has got to do what they did against Alabama. They went out there and they controlled the line of scrimmage. University of Miami's defensive line is much better than Alabama's, at least on the edges. That's one thing that I trust in Mike Norvell and Gus Malzahn is they figure out a way to run the ball on everybody. They just do. Gus has done it for years. Coach Norvell, outside of last year where we had some struggles, has figured it out everywhere that he's been on how to run the ball. And so I suspect we'll have a scheme that will be able to take advantage of some of that. If Miami gets out of those rush lanes, we're going to make them pay. I don't think that they're going to pull back the reins on Castellano at all and say, hey, listen, here's your read 1, read 2. If you don't see it, pull it down and take off. And that wears on a defensive line when you've got to chase a quarterback, you're rushing a passer, and then you've got to chase him down the field. That will wear a team down. I don't know what Miami's defensive line depth looks like once you get past those initial 2 guys, those 2 edge rushers that they have, which are, they're dominant players. I don't know what the rest of that depth looks like. So, and then I'm looking forward to seeing our defensive line step up. They didn't have a good day at the office last week against Virginia. And so I think they understand that. And it's not just a defensive line. I caution folks when they watch the games and they see guys getting runs here and hit runs there. It's not always your defensive lineman. I used to get tired of getting blamed for stuff that you've got those linebackers back there that have a responsibility too. And so we've got to have better linebacker play this week. But I think it's going to be a very tight game. I don't see either team kind of blowing anybody out. It's going to come down to who can go out there in the fourth quarter and exercise their will.
And are you predicting a Florida State win?
Oh, absolutely. I think, folks that got upset last week after the Virginia game, and I was upset at myself. I was like, oh man, we really could have had that. Then I look back and saying, listen, coming into the season after what we did last year, if I would have told you through the first quarter of the season that we'd be 3-1, you'd be pretty darn excited. And everything that we want to accomplish is still out there in front of us. We beat number 3 Miami, and we shoot right back up the rankings. And then the AP rankings don't matter. They really don't. I think what you've seen people this year kind of look at those voters and saying, hey, these folks are just out there just mailing it in. Many of them will get down to the College Football Playoff Committee. They'll make the rankings that matter. We keep winning. We win this one. We're right back in the conversation, and the season moves on.
The one thing that stands out to me and where I think the game's going to be won is who wins the battle of time of possession. Because if Florida State or Miami, whichever team wins time of possession, that tells me they're able to run the ball really well. Miami was able to do that against Florida. Mark Fletcher went for about 120 yards. Florida State's got a really strong running game. If they're able to run the ball well and maintain possession, that tells me that they're still in the game. They're not playing from behind. They don't have to feel like they have to press. And Tommy has to win it with the pass. So if Florida State wins time of possession, I think they win the game. I agree with you. It's going to be a close game. But at the end of the day, I've got Miami winning 28-21.
I hear where you're at. I think Florida State wins this game 31-27. I think it's going to be close. I think you're absolutely right on the time of possession. Two teams that really want to run the ball, that have been effective running the ball. So we'll see how it all shakes out. But I think FSU wins this one.
Well, that's it, Couch Coach Nation. You've heard from the legend, Corey Simon. Corey, thank you for joining us on Complete BS. You can follow Complete BS Pod on X, Instagram, and make sure to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Thanks for listening to Complete BS. Be sure to subscribe, share, and follow us online. And tell us what you think of this episode. Use hashtag CouchCoachNation, and let's keep the conversation going.
Yeah, I got to tell you about a new game-changing product. It's called Z-Biotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic Drink. It's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic invented by PhD scientists. Here's what happens when you drink. A toxic byproduct builds up in your gut that's to blame for those rough mornings. Z-Biotics is designed to break this byproduct down. Just drink it before your first drink of the night. Head to zbiotics.com/meateater and use code meateater to get 15% off and a 100% money back guarantee. That's zbiotics.com/meateater.